Hello, I'm Stephen Koonin, the founding director of NYU's Center for Urban Science and Progress, or CUSP. I'd like to tell you a bit about CUSP, the rationale, the structure of the organization, some of the programs that we're pursuing. CUSP is part of New York City's Applied Sciences Initiative, and it was announced in April of 2012. Unlike other academic organizations, CUSP is a mission-driven research and education enterprise aiming not only for relevance, but also impact on cities around the world. We stand at the confluence of two big but simple themes. One is big data, and the other is big cities. The big cities rationale is actually quite simple. The world is urbanizing rapidly. Right now, more than half of the people on the globe live in urban environments. By 2050, that number will go to 80%. And in the developed world already, 80% of the people live in urban environments. Cities are therefore, quite simply, where the people are. They're where resources are consumed, they're where economic activity happens, and they are where innovation happens. Many have said that cities are both the source of our problems over the next several decades, but they're also where the innovations will happen that will solve those problems. All cities around the globe need to be as good as they can be for global reasons of sustainability. But any individual city also needs to excel because we're in a global competition for talent, for ideas, and for capital. Cities need to be more efficient, they need to be more resilient, they need to be sustainable. But they also need to provide quality of life for their citizens, engagement of their citizens, and equity of opportunity among their citizens. CUSP's second big theme is big data. I think we've all come to realize that our informatics capabilities are exploding. We can acquire, store, transmit, analyze data with exponentially growing ease. As this chart shows, internet traffic, for example, is growing at 30% a year. We are also seeing a proliferation throughout society of static and mobile sensors, and are starting to see the interconnectivity of things as well as of people. This chart shows just how much goes on over the internet in a given minute, and one of the remarkable facts contained here is that within 2 years there will be twice as many devices connected to the net as there are people on the globe. And so naturally, for a scientist, the question arises is how do we instrument a city? We need to acquire and understand data on three different dimensions. The first is the infrastructure of the city, the roads, the pipelines, the electrical grid. What is the condition of that infrastructure and how is it operating? The second dimension we need to understand about cities is the environment. The meteorological variables, the pollution, the animals and plants that live in the city, and noise, which is an important dimension we're trying to tackle in CUSP. And then finally, we need to understand the people in the cities. Cities are built by people, they're built for people, and ideally we would like to understand relationships among people, where the people are, their economic and telecommunications activities, their health, their nutrition, their opinions, and so on. Naturally, this raises the question of privacy, and I can assure you that CUSP is working very hard to develop methods that will maintain privacy even as we can use data to better understand the people in cities. Our belief is that data in these three dimensions, if properly acquired, integrated, and analyzed, can lead to multiple benefits. City government can be taken beyond imperfect understanding so that it can be more efficient and better serve the citizens. There can be better city planning, there can be better city policies. We can improve the engagement of citizens with the government. We can enable the private sector to develop new products and services for the city governments, for citizens, and for other corporations. And then finally, we can enable a revolution in the social sciences. You might know, for example, that a traditional social science methodology is to do a survey of perhaps 1,000 people and then analyze that data over the course of several years. With new technologies available to us, we can acquire data on millions of people at once and use that to better understand how people behave, how they interact with one another, how they make decisions, and so on. Let me then talk a bit about urban data. Of course, data about cities have been collected for millennia. In fact, the word statistics comes from the Latin word meaning of the state or of the city. But new technologies are providing data on unprecedented granularity, variety, and completeness that make cities an entirely new object of study. It feels these days as though it must have felt when Galileo first turned his telescope to the heavens or Van Leeuwenhoek first looked at a living cell through the microscope. We have many different sources of urban data these days. There are, of course, the traditional sources such as administrative records, census, building permits. There's transactional data like sales and communications. There's operational data like how is the traffic flowing or how is the health system delivering what it needs to do. And increasingly, social media data, blogs, Twitter, Facebook, up on the web. But increasingly, we're seeing sensors now throughout society, personal sensors such as Fitbit and other activity monitors that people are carrying. We're seeing a proliferation of in situ sensors. We have the opportunity to crowdsource data through mobile devices, and we have sensors at choke points such as toll booths or portals through which people pass. And then there are opportunities for novel sensor technologies such as imagery in the visible, the infrared, radar, LiDAR, new methods of biological sensing. All of these different data streams can be combined together to give us, as I said, an unprecedented picture of the city, how it's working, and how it might be improved. Let me start by just giving you some statistics about sensors throughout the United States. Right now, there's just about one mobile phone for every person in the country, and they're talking to about 500,000 cell towers. And of course, each tower knows which particular set of phones it's talking to at any given time. There are roughly 5,000 traffic cameras throughout the United States. Most people actually think this is a severe underestimate. And they're, of course, watching the traffic as it goes by. There are 400,000 ATMs in the country with video recording. That silver ball on the face of the ATM is recording people as they make transactions. There are 30 million commercial surveillance cameras in the country, one for every 10 people. And there are a proliferation of automatic license plate readers that can read up to 1,000 plates a minute to find vehicles of interest. So if you're a fan of the 11 o'clock news, as I am, it's rare now to see a report of a crime without seeing the video that goes along with it. Let me take you on a tour of some of the kinds of data that CUSP has or expects to have. Let me start with energy use in buildings. New York City passed a law in 2009 that said that all large buildings above 50,000 square feet had to report every year their energy use. The electricity, natural gas, heating oil, steam, water consumption. The left-hand panel is shown a histogram for residential buildings. The energy intensity, BTUs per square foot per year. And you can see that that histogram is quite a normal distribution and rather unremarkable. But if you look at the histogram on the right, which is for commercial buildings, you see a great variation in energy use, with some buildings using more than 5 times the energy per square foot that other buildings do. This big data set allows us to confidently identify those outliers and begin to ask, why is their energy use so high? Is it the construction of the building? Is it the way in which the building is operated? Is it the activity within the building? Or is it simply misreporting? Another example is data from New York City's 311 complaint line, which gets millions of calls a year. Roughly 1/3 of them are associated with noise, and you can see from this map where the complaints in the Washington Square area arise from. Data like this help us pinpoint where some of the problems are in the cities. Another example of more serendipitous data is given by this Foursquare Check-In Map. For those of you above a certain age, Foursquare is a social media application that allows users to check in, to declare their location, and perhaps add a comment for their friends. And this map shows the check-ins in Manhattan in 3 successive hours on a Monday afternoon in 2011. And what you can see is the motion of people from their workplace to the entertainment spots in the city as the hours progress. Another example from mobile phones are the call detail records. In this example, researchers in the Bay Area and Boston used the call detail records for 500,000 people over 6 weeks to understand traffic patterns in their area, where people are starting from and where they want to go to during the morning and evening commutes. Previously, such data could be acquired only every few years through a survey of a few thousand people. And now one can have continuous data on the scale of 500,000 people. Needless to say, this completely changes the way in which traffic managers and planners can do their business. Another set of data that CUSP has is the set of taxi data from the Taxi and Limousine Commission in New York City. There are roughly 500,000 taxi rides a day, or 180 million taxi rides a year, and CUSP researchers have data on every one of those rides. Where it starts, where it stops, when did it happen, what was the fare, and what was the tip. And so, for example, in this analysis, one can see where the taxi pickups happen and where the drop-offs happen. And interestingly, you conclude that the drop-offs happen on the avenues more frequently and the pickups happen on the streets. And if you ride the city taxis frequently, you can kind of make up a story about why that might be true. Another analysis of the taxi data shows the pulse of the city. This is the number of rides per day in 2011. And you can see the weekly cycle, the low number on Sunday, the high number on Friday. And you can also see anomalies in this pattern. For example, Christmas, when Hurricane Irene blew through the city, when a half marathon happened in April. Information like this is very important in establishing the pulse of the city, the normalcy against which anomalies can be judged. Very different kind of data that CUSP is beginning to test is illustrated and inspired by this picture, which is the view of Lower Manhattan taken from the Empire State Building by an ordinary camera. And the remarkable thing about this picture is, first of all, you can see a long way. For those of you who know the city, you can easily see the Verrazano Bridge across the Narrows. But equally remarkable is that you can see an enormous number of lights, approximately 50,000 in this image. And it's possible to build systems that will watch each one of those lights go on and off, flicker, what is their color, and so glean information about energy use, about activity, about where the power might be on or off during an emergency situation. The same kind of situation is illustrated by this image, which is a view of Lower Manhattan in the infrared rather than light, and so we're now looking at heat. There are several remarkable features in this image. For example, that building allows us to see the thermostat settings or insulation for every one of the units. That building shows the peculiar pattern of being hot at the bottom and hot at the top, but cool in the middle, because there's a data center inside and hot vents on the roof. And finally, that set of buildings is public housing, where the heat is turned up and the residents are controlling the temperature by keeping the windows open. Not an uncommon situation in New York City. And if you're a scientist, you can realize that you can do this kind of sensing in other modalities. For example, in hyperspectral imaging, which allows you to look at particular molecular species like methane, carbon dioxide, ozone, and so on. What's remarkable about this synoptic imaging is that a single sensor can cover of order 500,000 people at once. There are so many different things that cities could do with this data once it's properly integrated and analyzed that can make their operations more efficient, whether it's traffic flow or utility load on the grid. They can monitor the conditions of their infrastructure, potholes, leaks, things of that sort. We can do better planning for infrastructure. We can improve compliance with city regulations. We can obviously do a better job on public health. We can monitor, detect abnormal conditions and better manage them. We can do data-driven formulation of city policies. We can better inform the citizenry and improve economic activity and competitiveness. With that, that's the rationale for CUSP. Let me now talk a little bit about the organization. We are a partnership of 4 classes of organizations: academic, corporate, national laboratories, and government agencies. On the academic side, we are led by NYU, have participation from NYU Poly, the City University of New York, the University of Warwick, the University of Toronto, Carnegie Mellon University, and IIT Bombay. Among our corporate partners, we have IBM, Xerox, Microsoft as lead partners. We also have participation from National Grid, Con Edison, Lutron, Cisco, and Siemens, and participation from various consultancies, AECOM, Arup, and IDEO. The national laboratories are a very important component of what we do. Brookhaven National Laboratory, Sandia, Livermore, and Los Alamos are participating, providing people, computational cycles, and expertise. And then, most importantly, and perhaps uniquely, we have city and state agencies concerned with New York City as partners in our enterprise. There are 13 named agencies of New York City, together with the Metropolitan Transit Authority and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. All of these partners are contributing people, data, computational cycles, expertise. The vision for CUSP is that New York City is both the laboratory and the classroom for what we do. We are about helping the city better acquire, integrate, analyze data for the common good. We look to the city for opportunities to create and demonstrate new technologies, and also about training people to develop and implement these new technologies. We expect that those activities will make CUSP a world-leading center in the new field of urban informatics. You might ask, why is CUSP focused so much on data? And there are several compelling reasons. One is that you need data if you're going to fix urban problems. Secondly, data is unifying across the disciplines and domains. With data, a social scientist can be talking to an engineer, whereas if we're focused on the more physical things, such as, for example, building a better material for photovoltaics, that conversation is much more difficult. A third is that informatics is among the most rapidly moving of the technology areas. As I showed you at the beginning of my presentation, informatics capabilities are expanding exponentially. There is nothing else, except perhaps for genomic sequencing, that is moving as rapidly. Yet another reason is that there is ample white space for the application of informatics to urban problems. We routinely have conversations for less than an hour at the blackboard where you can fill the workspace with 50 different ideas for what you might be able to do about urban problems with information technologies. And maybe most compelling is that the informatics overlay on the physical infrastructure of a city can have great near and midterm impacts. You know, the physical infrastructure of a city takes forever to change. Buildings last for 50 years. The Second Avenue subway line in New York City here has been 40 years in discussion and will take another roughly 10 years in order to complete. But if we can put on top of the existing infrastructure an informatics capability that senses what's going on, models it, and allows us to intervene, we can get faster and more effective returns on our investment over the next decade or two in terms of efficiency. And then finally, data research is the most cost-effective kinds of research. Physical laboratories are very expensive. Our partner institutions have great capabilities in these physical areas. CUSP will, of course, be engaging them as it looks to solutions, but the informatics right now is where the highest bang for the buck is. We often talk in CUSP about big data, and have come to realize that it's not a panacea. But if you're smart, big data can make you seem brilliant, while if you misapply it, it can make you seem dumb. To give you some idea of the scale that we envision for CUSP, within the decade, we expect to have 50 senior researchers on site, some from academia, others from industry and the national laboratories. We'll have 30 postdocs, some 400 master's students, about 100 PhD students. We are and will be located in downtown Brooklyn, currently in leased space in Metrotech, and within 4 years, we will have roughly 1/3 of the old MTA headquarters, which NYU is in the process of fully renovating. We expect government, particularly federal, foundation, philanthropic, and academic funding to total some $70 million a year within the decade. We have stood up an educational program in CUSP. We began advertising a 1-year master's program in applied urban science and informatics. We closed applications within the last month and are expecting an extraordinary class of roughly 25 students to start in August of 2013. The curriculum is a mix, roughly 25% informatics technologies, another 25% urban systems, about 50% participation in some kind of project or internship, and then another roughly 10% in softer skills such as organizational leadership or entrepreneurship. We expect that our programs will train professionals who understand both the potential of informatics and how it can be applied to urban systems. In the future, we expect to stand up a PhD program, mount global executive education activities, offer joint degrees with other NYU schools and departments, and promote a distance and online learning activity. Our students will find employment opportunities in city agencies, not only in New York, but around the world, in large corporations that serve cities, in startup companies, and in non-governmental organizations. Let me then say a word about CUSP's research program. We think about the research as the intersection of two different entities. One is the informatics domain, a team of researchers who can acquire, integrate, and analyze or understand large urban data sets. The disciplines here are data management, data curation, sensors, visualization, GIS, data mining, modeling, and simulation. At the same time, we need a set of researchers who truly understand the city and its various systems, whether it's utilities, buildings, transportation, health. And then we can execute a number of projects, both large and small, that combine the disciplinary informatics expertise together with the domain knowledge. In addition, we can use the informatics chain to feed science users, social scientists who want to understand how people interact with the built and natural environment, And then we have numerous opportunities to engage the broader citizenry in what we're doing, in helping to acquire or analyze the data, and then, of course, acting upon it as we can distribute it back out to the people. In order to be a real organization and go beyond a job shop, we need a couple of enduring facilities and capabilities that will want to attract people to CUSP. One of them is the data warehouse. Information about New York City from a great diversity of sources, cleaned up, made interoperable, with the technologies and infrastructure to properly analyze it while preserving privacy and addressing other access concerns. We need an urban observatory to implement some of the ideas I discussed when we talked about synoptic imaging. We need a modeling capability that allows us to integrate the diverse data sets, understand them and their interrelationships, and provide some predictive capabilities for city management, for emergency response, and for long-term planning. And then finally, we are pursuing a facility called Quantified Community, which is a group of 5,000 to 10,000 people who are voluntarily living in an environment where we can fully instrument the infrastructure and their activities. Needless to say, we are out and about talking frequently and in depth with various city agencies, and they have proposed a variety of projects that we might undertake. Among the projects we're currently working on are just making the city data sets across the many different agencies, getting them cleaned up, making them interoperable, and developing the tools with which they can be analyzed. Correlations among those data sets can already be seen to be helping the city in terms of its various activities. We're pursuing projects that will measure noise throughout the city, characterize it, push that understanding out to the citizens, and help the city better enforce noise laws. Some of our activities are going on with respect to pollution and with respect to temperature during heat waves. We are working on projects that address mobility, helping citizens move around the city more reliably and more efficiently. We're pursuing projects that allow new technologies to be applied to the novel sensing of public health, and we have an extensive program on the efficiency of buildings. And then finally, we're pursuing some very interesting science about how large urban data sets can be used to understand how people make decisions in their daily lives. Let me close by outlining what we think success might look like in 5 years. We need to define and elaborate what this new field of urban science is. We are trying to create a vibrant, world-class center pursuing that science, nucleating a community within NYU, NYU Poly, and our other partners, and standing up some of the facilities that I've described. We will need to have succeeded in 3 or 4 projects over the next 5 years that have a demonstrable impact upon the city and or its citizens. We need to become a trusted partner with city government and build public understanding and engagement with what we're doing. We will have liked to have trained several hundred people in this new field. We will have liked to have developed and commercialized several technologies, either through our big partners or through startups. We'd like to bring new tools to the social science, and after a few years begin taking this brand and concept that we will have developed in New York City and franchising it to our partners and to the rest of the world. As you can see, we're embarked upon a unique and extraordinarily exciting enterprise with the potential to improve the lives of citizens and the operation of cities around the world. If you'd like to find out more, please visit our website at cusp.nyu.edu. Thank you for your attention during this brief overview of CUSP.